Welcome to Gapology Radio with your hosts Mark Thienes and Brian Brockhoff, authors of the leadership development books Gapology, Imbar, and Speed of Purpose. At Gapology, our purpose is to help leaders achieve their greatest potential. To learn more about our groundbreaking books and training services, visit our website, gapology.org.
Hey everybody, welcome to Gapology Radio. As you're laying out your plans for this year, make sure that you're being strategic about leadership development for your teams. From those high-performing individual contributors to those emerging leaders and all the way up through the ranks, any people leader on your team will benefit greatly from Gapology. We have our set of flagship books, an audible version of Gapology, and our virtual e-learning course on udemy.com. Add all of that to the blogs on our website and this podcast show, and we really have something for everybody. And if you'd like us to lead a workshop or even just provide some guidance on implementing some of our offerings, feel free to reach out. Our email is contact@gapology.org, and of course you can always reach out to us through social media. And all the information around all these things can be found on our website, gapology.org. And as for tonight, we thought we'd kick off this 8th season of the show with a little history lesson for some fun. So let's go ahead and jump right in with Mark Thienes, the original Gapologist himself. Hey Mark, how you doing?
Good, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. Happy New Year to you.
Same to you.
Yeah, as we're recording this, it is now 2024. And, I know listeners are going to be listening, 10, 20 years down the road. So, looking back in time, it's now 2024 and, we don't know what's ahead. So, there might be some crazy stuff ahead.
Well, there's always crazy stuff ahead, but we know that Gapology can overcome crazy stuff.
Yeah.
The craziest thing was preparing to talk about Gapology tonight. It was looking back. It's been quite a while and quite a journey.
Yeah, it totally is. This is a little bit different podcast for our listeners out there. Typically we really focus in on specific things that people are facing in the real world out there. And one of the questions we get oftentimes is, where did Gapology come from? It's such a unique name. And the process, while simple to, see on the surface, to really dig in and actually apply it, there's a lot of complexity there. And so a lot of people want to know, how did you come up with this? Where did it come from? And so forth. So, we really thought, what a great time as we start to head into the future to take a few minutes and look to the past and see, where did this all come from? How did it, appear in our lives? How did we pull this all together, put the book together and that kind of thing? And I thought we would start at the very beginning. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that would be great. And just to let the group know, the other thing you and I have agreed upon is that 100 years from now, we believe that Gapology will be known by everyone.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's just our, our own lack of marketing skill that isn't already here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, somebody once told us that Gapology is a universal truth. And I really do believe that. Any place that there are leaders and followers, any sort of business, any industry, Gapology fits, because it's all about human nature, communication, and that type of thing. So
I remember that day vividly.
Yeah.
So I was teaching a group of lawyers in Denver Gapology. And near the end of the session, one of the lawyers jumped out of his chair and began dancing around the room and screaming, "It's a universal truth." And pretty soon people joined in, and it was just this harmonious thing that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. Right. But you know what? He was right. He was right.
Yeah, I vividly remember you telling me that. It is so true. So why don't we jump back about, 2000 what?
20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago.
Okay, that's a good round number.
Yeah, so as my career developed in retail, I was a retail guy. I got promoted about 20 years ago to a big position, and I had 330 stores, approximately 330 retail stores. The incredible thing about that was that it was a laboratory to look at results and really learn how results are achieved. So the 300 plus stores had the same product, they had the same customer, they had the same advertising each week. We ran an ad every week, 52 weeks a year. Yet their results were quite different. So taking over 300 plus stores, I had an incredible curiosity about why some of the stores were winning and why some of the stores were not. So I analyzed the results and split them into groups. I had the A group, which is the upper 10% in results. And I looked at the results that they were accountable for. The stuff you can think of: sales, profit, customer retention, etc. So I called the top 10% the A group, and I called the bottom 10% the C group. And that meant that the B group, the middle 80%, was, somewhere in the middle. The crazy thing that occurred to me, which I hadn't thought of before, was that the incredible performance of the A group, that top 10%, was being wiped out by the C group, the bottom 10%. So we all became B, and I was obsessed with being a top performer and not being B. So I had to figure out how we were winning in the top 10% and how we were not winning in that bottom 10%.
Yeah, I think that is one of the incredible learnings. So often we do, focus just on one of those groups, and we don't really think about the fact that, that bottom group, they are canceling out all those amazing results being driven by our top performers.
Yeah, cancel is the right word. It cancels it out.
Right.
And we become B. The 300 stores were over 20 states. So that incorporated a lot of travel. So every week I would travel to a different market. And what I would do is I would go spend time in the A group stores and the C group stores. I wouldn't spend a lot of time in the B. I wanted to understand the difference between the A and the C to try and figure out what we could do. The first thing that hit me was the incredible similarities in the A group. So I fly to Minneapolis, and then next week I fly to Houston, and the A group are very similar. They don't know each other. They've never talked before. They didn't go to school together. They have different backgrounds. But the A group in Minnesota and the A group in Houston, using those as examples, were very similar. And where they were similar is they had taught their teams what to do, how to do it, why it mattered, and when it must be done. And that seemed to create an action in the teams. So they seemed to be operating from the same playbook. And I hadn't expected that. I didn't think that would happen, but it energized me because the thought that the A group was onto something that we could share with others was incredibly energizing.
Yeah, I think it's so amazing how, first of all, number one, how powerful curiosity can be. When you said that, winning was a curiosity, that you're curious how that happened, why the A players were the A players, all that. I think leaders out there really do need to spend time being curious. Just take a step back, look at your business and think and ask yourself the questions, and then get out there and start investigating. I think there's a lot of power there.
Yeah, so you're bringing up a great point. So every week we had a different ad, as I mentioned earlier. So everybody had the same ad. And we sent out a set of instructions on Thursday before the ad ran on Sunday on how to execute the ad, what to do. So the A group and the C group got the same memo, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So everybody had the same set of instructions. But for some reason, the A group team knew what to do, how to do it, why it mattered, when it must be done, and that created that action in the team. So it was pretty interesting that it almost appeared that the A group got a different memo than the C group. Mm-hmm. So I would show up in a market in an A group store, and often not even announce that I was there. I would just come in as a customer and see how it felt and understand what was going on and what the focus was. I would do that same thing in the A group and the C group. And it was quite enlightening. I then started interviewing the leaders. So I would tell them who I was and shake hands, introduce myself, and then talk to the leaders about why their results were so exceptional in the A group or why in the C group they were missing the result expectations. And it became, again, very clear that the A group knew what to do and how to do it, why it mattered, when it's got to be done, and they took action. And in general, the C group, the team did not know. Mm-hmm. I would find often a cashier, the lowest level role in a store, a cashier in an A group store that knew more than the leaders potentially in the C group. And it was just crazy. That was just shocking to me.
Yeah.
And it was energizing though, mm-hmm. because I knew we could overcome it. Mm-hmm. And I knew that the A group had figured it out. They had figured out how to create the right action, and the C group had not. And I was onto something big. Now, again, this was after months of travel and months of interviewing and documenting the interviews, but it all started to come together. And I was thinking, I'm onto something. And during that time, the overall division was able to achieve company leading results already. And now we were about to figure out how to just blow it away.
Mm-hmm. So Mark, can I ask a question? So what do you think drove those A leaders? Because it feels like, well, some leaders who want to be A are making these choices, have developed this on their own at that point. What do you think drove them?
I'm certainly the publishing of the results was a big factor. Mm-hmm. They probably liked seeing their name in lights at the top of the report. We publish the results each week. Mm-hmm. I assume, though, they had a mentor that had taught them some things that maybe others had not experienced, and likely their leader, was exceptional and ensured that all of the pieces that needed to come together to have a successful week were there. We really managed the business week by week because we had a different ad every week. So we were able to look at it like an NFL game. You either win or lose each week, and you have 52 weeks a year. And that A group really figured that out, and they thrived on that. And somehow the C group was left behind. And it really wasn't their issue, was what I started to conclude. It was just our own leadership issue. Mm-hmm. And there's more to come on that. But it was clear that the C group didn't know what the A group knew.
Right.
And that also meant to me very quickly, even though I hadn't spent time with the B group, a lot of time with them, that they didn't know everything the A group was doing. Mm-hmm. And that there was potential here to spread the wealth. That makes sense?
Yeah. And that's sort of what I was picturing, is that it was probably the district leader, the person that was over the stores, their leadership was probably being emulated, by some of those A players. If they're setting a good example, I was picturing that's probably one of the things. Did you see a lot of differences between markets that were A and markets that were C, and in the behaviors of those district leaders?
Yes, but the interesting thing was that in every market I could find A's, and in every market I could find C's. And they'd all received the same direction. Again, to recap, they had the same product,
Mm-hmm.
They had the same customer. They had the same ad every week, and they had the same direction on that ad. So they could have executed on their own with that.
Okay.
So it was eye opening.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
yeah, and there were A's and C's in every market.
Mm-hmm.
In every market, the greatest market in our world was the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, and that's where I met Brian, by the way.
Yeah, the hometown.
Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting. So how did you go then from observing, so documenting all this, looking at all the data, looking at, what those patterns were that emerged? How did you put it all together then?
Well, one of the behaviors I had was that every evening after visiting the stores, I would try and wind down and document my findings and try and understand it. And a pattern emerged, and that was that the what to do and how to do it, which was present in the A group, was clearly a knowledge gap that was closed by those leaders. So I started seeing this knowledge gap piece emerge as being massive in terms of determining execution. If you have a knowledge gap, you will not achieve the results you're expecting. I then saw the why it mattered and the when it must be done as the importance gap. I could see this other gap emerge that was also big. And if you have an importance gap, you're not going to achieve the results. And then I saw the action as sort of the outcome of those two. And if you have an action gap, picture this: someone knows what to do, how to do it. They know why it matters. They know when it must be done. And that team member doesn't do it. That's a performance issue. That's totally different. So it just started to emerge. This KINA, and this was before the car company, I think, existed.
Yeah.
Kia. But if you want to remember it today, it's KINA. It's the knowledge gap, importance gap, and action gap. They are sequential. They are dependent upon each other. And it suddenly was there in the notes in my journal one night. And I started teaching it. So rather than going out and observing it, I started teaching it. And oh my God, that's when it all started to come together. And I started calling it Gapology because I didn't know what else to call it. And it just seemed to fit. Close the knowledge gap, close the importance gap, close the action gap, and wow, the results happen. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it all came together.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the questions that I get a lot is where did the name come from? And it is a bit of a science. So if you look at the process, I mean, there's a lot of, analyzing results, analyzing behaviors, and then developing action plans from that. There is a bit of a science there. Certainly there's an art to it, but the process itself can be very scientific.
Yeah. And, I just started teaching it everywhere. So I'd go to the same markets, lots and lots of markets. And instead of going out and observing stores, I would pull groups together and teach them Gapology everywhere I went. Mm-hmm. Flip chart. Do you remember that, Brian?
I was literally sitting here.
Out in your store?
Yeah, I was literally sitting here picturing the first time I saw those three circles. And it wasn't in my store. It was in one of the neighboring suburb stores. And I picture sitting, I was probably maybe 3 rows back and going, oh my gosh, this gives me a focus. And where I think I was a good leader, but I was a good leader because, I wanted to be a good leader. I wanted to provide good, leadership to the team and deliver good results and all that. But seeing this made me great because it gave me a clear step-by-step process to lead, develop, and grow my team. And I remember the day very vividly. I remember what I did right after the session. I drove back to my store incognito, walked my store, and I began implementing Gapology right there, and it changed my life.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So what I started doing was going to the C group and teaching them Gapology to see what could happen. Can winning be taught? Is that A group just somehow born with it in their genes, or can we teach it to everyone? And the incredible thing that happened was when I started teaching the C group market by market by market Gapology, some of the C group became A.
Mm-hmm.
They became A.
Yeah.
And we might have given up on them or fired them, but they were A when they had Gapology. They got it. And most of them became B, by the way. They moved up into that B group. But our overall results just soared. And we were number one in the company week by week for every week for 5 or 7 years straight. I lost track. We were always the top. The other amazing thing is that the A group got better. So I would teach Gapology to the A group. They would say, "Oh my God, we've never seen that before," because it was like a formalized process for them. And suddenly they knew what they were doing and they leveraged it and they got better. So the A group actually moved up. And so the crazy thing is somehow we had discovered a process that works every time. It works everywhere. You can teach it to, anybody. And we were just on a roll, and it was incredible. And there was no book. The book hadn't been written yet.
Nope.
And we were just like, "Oh my God, this is crazy," and we got to tell everybody about it. So,
so where did the root solutions piece come from? So, I know the gaps were the biggest discovery, and then from that, how did you come up with the root solutions? Where'd those come from?
Yeah, so in the documentation of what the A group did, under the knowledge gap, I recorded all of the methods from the interviews that they talked about, and I determined that the top methods to close the knowledge gap were training, teaching, and talent. And those were incredibly rock solid as the top 3. I wanted to limit it to 3. So the A group would train their team and understood the importance of that. They were relentless in that. Leaders were teachers. They viewed themselves as teachers, which was crazy. And it worked. They spent all day teaching. And they ensured that they hired talented people so that they could effectively teach and train. So that closed the knowledge gap. In the importance gap, they set clear expectations. So the team knew what was expected, how they were measured. That was huge. They communicated clearly. They didn't over communicate. They communicated clearly. So when they communicated, it was on purpose. And they were clear on prioritization. So expectations, communication, and prioritization were the root solutions that closed the importance gap. And the action gap just was closed often by those, but they had accountability. So if someone didn't do their job despite knowing what to do and how to do it when it had to be done and why it mattered, they were a performance issue. They knew that. They had a commitment that the leader showed. You'd see in the C group the leader walk by a customer. In the A group, they would never do that. They would help the customer. They modeled a behavior. And it all really started to come together, and they created a culture of action. And those became the root solutions. So knowledge was training, teaching, and talent. The importance gap was closed with expectations, communication, and prioritization. And the action gap was closed with accountability, commitment, and culture. And wow, we had the chapters of a book all laid out right there. And many years later, those haven't changed.
No, really, that's the foundation of Gapology. So everything from that has been built. And that is, you said it, rock solid. And all the tools, all the activities, all the methods that we teach, everything is built from that. And you know, I think it's just incredible, Mark, how just from your observing, from your curiosity, and then the documentation of all that and the analysis and all that hard work that you did up front, put together something that is so rock solid that everything else, you know, can be built from it. The other beauty of all this is just being able to take a step back and say, okay, so this can be actually taught to any organization, any team that has leaders and followers that have a team. This works every time.
Yeah. We haven't seen an example where it doesn't work. Some of the other things that we learned right then were that the leader owns the K and the I.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The leader owns the knowledge gap and the importance gap. They've got to close those gaps. And it was real common in the C group for the leader to blame the team for lack of knowledge or lack of understanding of the importance.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like, hey, we went over that. We went over that. It's their issue.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, in the A group, they fully understood that they own that knowledge gap and importance gap, and they worked to close it. And they didn't let up until it was closed. And they, in the A group, they understood that action then was a choice by the team. And if somebody didn't want to perform, they were an underperformer and they couldn't make the team. And so the contrast between the A group and the C group was incredible in terms of the ownership of the knowledge gap and importance gap. Mm-hmm. We learned so much from that. And so I wear a sweatshirt, you've seen it, Brian, that says Gap. And it's you know, it's just my way of understanding. Anytime I want to understand where the gap is, just look in the mirror, because it's always the leader.
Right.
So when there's a gap, just go look. It's you. Mm-hmm. The other thing that emerged from this, which was incredible, was a pattern of behavior in the A group that we call the habit ladder, and it was a way to achieve habit in a team. And there's 5 steps, and they are communication of a process or whatever it might be that you're trying to achieve. And that's generally where most of the teams would stop. But the A group continued from communication to verifying understanding. Yeah, you have to know that the knowledge gap's closed, that the importance gap's closed, that they understand that. It then goes on to agreement, asking for agreement to execute it. It then goes on to an incredibly critical step, which is practice and feedback, and then practice and feedback and practice and feedback until you become great at something. And that leads to habit. And it's incredible. So if any of you have not understood or executed the habit ladder, go for it. It's how you want to design all training, all rollouts. If every training and development team in the world would simply use that, it's the flow and formation of the training that you need for whatever you're doing. So
yeah, the habit ladder is, I would say, of all the things in our book, the number one most remembered, commented on, applied tools in our whole book. We've got several different tools that have made big impacts on people, but I would say that is the primary one that most people really, really attach to.
And for everyone on the podcast tonight to understand, at this point, we still haven't written the book yet.
Yeah. Right.
So I'll tell you how that happened. So our business took off. We were a dominant force in the industry. We were, tops in the company by far. And the head of retail approached me and said, "You got to write a book on this." And I said, "No, I'm not going to write a book. I don't have time." He said, "No, you got to write a book." I said, "Okay." And I'd come to know Brian, and he was part of my team in Twin Cities. And I knew he was a very talented graphic designer and writer. At one point, I think it was '08, he had a little bit of time on his hands, and I reached out for him, and we came together and put together a book called Gapology.
Yeah.
And again, 100 years from now, you're going to hear more about it than you do today. I'm sure you'll all be around. Mm-hmm. And it's incredible. And he and his wife, Jo, recorded the Audible version, by the way, and they did an amazing job. It's incredible. And I hear about that every day. And so we put together a book called Gapology. And just so those of you on the call know the industries where it's already rolled out and worked incredibly, they would be as follows. Retail, it goes nuts in retail. That's where we found it, and it certainly works there. It's the foundation of the operation of the largest store count retailer in America. They announced that recently. But retail is a no-brainer. It works in restaurants. Our first big client was Buffalo Wild Wings. I don't mind sharing that. And it just went crazy there. It works in hotels. It works in banking. It works in finance. It works in real estate. It works in academia. We were shocked one year by the teacher of the year in the state of Kansas. When asked why he was teacher of the year, he referenced Gapology in the classroom as being one of his key tactics. That was pretty awesome. It works in manufacturing. It works in construction. It works in sales. It works in trucking. Brian reminded me it works in women in trucking.
That's right.
Which was an event he hosted. It works in nursing. It works in high tech. We were able to take it to Africa to Christian missionaries, and it was incredibly successful there. And so that's where it works. I need to warn them about where it doesn't work. Should I do that now?
Yeah. Where doesn't it work?
So if you point out the gaps in your spouse or in your partner, we can assure you that's not a good idea.
No, don't do that.
So it does not work. We don't think it works in relationships, I guess.
No,
but other than that,
yeah, it works on your kids.
It works on the kids.
Sure.
Oh yeah, the kids benefit.
But if you have a gap in your relationship, it's probably you.
It's got to be. Look in the mirror. Yep. You found the gap and go for that one.
Absolutely.
But it's been just an incredible blessing, and we take great pride in how many people that it's benefited, and the career growth of the people that were with us when we did this has just been unbelievable. We won't bore you, but a lot of the people that were with us in the early days have just had incredible careers and success, and again built that foundation on Gapology.
Yeah. And I think it's worth sending a big thank you to all those people that took part in these interviews and the different senior leaders that helped to just help us grow, helped us to learn those types of things as well. And I want to take a minute and just thank you for inviting me to be part of this as well. That I still remember the day that I got that phone call, and I was like, why is Mark Thienes calling me? It was weird. And then when you laid this out, what you wanted to do, I hung up the phone, and immediately I turned to Joe and I said that this is going to be amazing. And, so I thank you for involving me in this whole thing as well.
I couldn't have done it without you. So you're amazing. So thank you for being part of it.
I appreciate that. Okay. Well, I think that brings everybody up to speed on where Gapology came from. And it's certainly a journey now. We are actually in our 8th season of the podcast, which is incredible. First season wasn't too much. We didn't do a whole lot. But, we tried to do as much as we could, year after year. And now that we've been doing this, I'm excited for the future and to see where this podcast continues to go.
Yeah, me too. So,
yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks much. We'll talk to you later, Mark.
All right. Talk to you then.
Okay. Bye. All right. That'll do it from here. For more information on all of our products and services, head on over to our website, gapology.org. Everyone have a fantastic week. We'll talk to you soon.
This has been a Gapology Institute production. Visit us at gapology.org.